You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hello, please let me see your ticket stubs for the double-edged double bill. This week, Netflix recommends The Night Comes for Project Power. Each week, Adam Thomas and Thomas Mariani will come to the table to discuss the randomly selected yin and yang of a double feature. Then, both will have to pick a number between 1 and 10 in order to seal their fates for the next episode. One will have 2 good movies, the other 2 bad ones. Let the chaos begin. I am Adam Thomas, and I am the often forgotten member of the 6 C's.
And I am Thomas Mariani, and you found me here, but you had to dig through a lot of different main menus, and I'm somehow in the action section, even though I should probably be in, like, the drama section, really, when you think about it.
Yeah.
Because there's no fun to be had here. It's always super serious on this show.
Yep.
100%. But, yeah, welcome to the Double-Edged Double Bill, everybody. This week, we decided to do a topic we've basically has like a placeholder several times throughout our run of the show, because we're doing Netflix original films, and it's a topic that's always relevant because they release, I don't know, like 80 of them a week.
I mean, at least. I mean, to the point where we've already done the picking for this show once.
Right.
There was a death, so we had to scrap it and do I believe it was Sean Connery, was it not?
Yeah, we literally recorded the show, and we did our picking for the Netflix thing, and then we heard the next day that Sean Connery died, so it's like, oh, let's scramble and go ahead and re-record you can hear that audio on our Patreon, patreon.com/GETBpod for just $1 a month. Plug early right there.
Plug.
Yes. But we're doing it now, officially, as an episode, Netflix original films, and it's weird how it's only been about, like, 6 or so years since they started doing original movies, yet they've been cranking them out, in terms of whether they buy up movies that are, like, come out at Sundance or something like that, or actually produce movies through their exorbitant amounts of debt that they accumulate. Like, I believe it's, $15 billion of debt?
It's something ridiculous. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't their first main one that Idris Elba one?
Beasts of No Nation, yeah, I believe that was the first, at least, big one I can remember. Because that was the one they really tried to first promote as, like, a big Oscar push at the time.
Right, and then Bright was their completely financed by Netflix one.
Yes.
Which, well, you know.
Still waiting for that sequel, Adam. I need more Orc Cup. What are the further adventures of Orc Cup?
Yeah, need Orc Cop. More Orc Cop, please.
Weirdly, we have not talked about that many actual Netflix originals on the show. Only 2. We've done The Irishman and Veronica.
Correct. Unless they got good word of mouth behind them, I tend to stay away from them. Simply because, like you said, there's at least 80 a week. It's like a minefield trying to navigate through. And the couple times I've tried with ones I haven't heard anything about, I've been pretty much burned on them to the point to where I've tried some. I couldn't even tell you what the names of them were at this point. I think the last major one that I watched was that Triple Frontier with the Dynamite cast, and I was pretty let down by it. So, I mean, it's not something I tend to really, really go for. Unless, like I said, there's a pretty good word of mouth or a really good cast.
I remember around the time when, like, Beasts of No Nation, they were starting to make these originals. And they'd obviously been famous for TV prior to that, with, like, Orange is the New Black and House of Cards had been a thing. But when they were starting to break into movies, it became so much more of a factor of, like, okay, this is a point where they define themselves. Because with, like, Beasts of No Nation, it's like, okay, we're going to be producing, like, actual serious films, and then started basically just, like, releasing schlock that almost made, like, a straight-to-video kind of thing. And then after a certain point, it became like, oh, we do that and everything else. Like, because certain other places, like Amazon Prime became way more prestige with their releases, or even like Hulu's kind of like trying to run a bit more of like a genre-y gambit to a certain extent. Netflix is like, everything. We're going to give like Charlie Kaufman the ability to do a weird surrealist movie, and then also do a huge big budget like blockbuster. We're going to release the last Orson Welles movie that was never finished. It's just like, we'll do all of it.
Yeah, we'll do everything.
Yeah.
All the way from Oscar bait to weird-ass, obscure shit to just the worst garbage you can find.
Yeah, which I'll at least give them that it's a diversity on that scale. It's just that problem of, like we mentioned, they release so many of those and the TV shows and whatever stuff they're importing just come out every week and like really bury some of these movies. Like even with The Night Comes For Us, which is our good feature that we picked at the end of our last episode, I ended up having to really scrounge through like the Netflix original section and the action section just to like find it.
Didn't want to use the old search bar.
Well, that's the thing. I intentionally just tried to use the main menu this time. Usually I would just do search.
Gotcha.
But this was more of an experiment. With Project Power, it's a bit harder to find our bad feature, just because spoilers didn't like it that much, so I downgraded it, and they make sure that disappears off your menu. If you don't like it, that algorithm.
Yes.
It's just like, no, what was this movie? It's never happened. No, we don't want to remind you of that.
Yeah, which is probably for the best in the case of Project Power.
Yeah, so if you're new, at the end of every episode, we pick a good and a bad feature. And in the case of last week, when we picked up between Adam's 2 bad choices, my 2 good choices, we ended up with Project Power as our bad pick. And then our good pick was The Night Comes For Us, which I had as a choice. But to be fair, our patrons that I previously mentioned at patreon.com/DEDBpod ended up voting for that one.
And I love those motherfuckers so much. I know I'm always shitting on them, but this was like a good call. Good call, guys.
Yes, good call, Edgelords. That's our pet name for all you patrons out there. But, yes, so well, let's go ahead and get into our 2 features then. We'll start off first with the bad one, though, of Project Power.
Power, power, speak a little louder.
If there was a pill
Hungry for that money, I'm coming to devour.
that could give you 5 minutes
Spit it so they get it. I'm embedded with the power.
of pure power,
I'm embedded with the power.
would you take it?
First, we stabilize it. Then we weaponize it.
Power goes to where it always goes, to the people that already have it.
They think they can just test their product on my city? We'll let them see what happens.
I thought we were like Batman and Robin.
No, Batman and Robin, that's a movie. This is real life.
So, Project Power came out last year, not too long ago, August 14th, 2020. A sort of an interesting time to release it during a summer where, you know, we're still in the middle of the COVID-19 quarantining. Hopefully most of you are still doing that, for the love of God. Don't, for the love of fucking God. Even if we're having vaccines roll out, come on, chill.
Yeah, just take it easy.
Yes, but in August of 2020, it was definitely like sort of a dire day for particularly like the summer. Like, oh, we usually get big like superhero movies and all this other stuff during the season. This was one of the ones people sort of gravitated towards, like, oh, it's kind of superhero adjacent. Let's just put it into our veins. And yeah, that's where this had like that sort of Netflix kind of interest that many Netflix movies have for like a week, where like over the weekend people watch it and then by next weekend they've completely forgotten about it because there's a different movie that's come out. And I think that's why, even though I kind of bemoaned that we ended up getting it as your choice, Adam, at the same time, it's kind of perfect as the example of like a forgettable Netflix movie.
Yeah, I think that's very, very true. But I mean, fair play on sort of their part, though. Like, yeah, I know you guys are hurting for these summer superhero movies. Here, we're going to give you one that has a pretty, these actors and blah blah blah, and it's shot real fucking cool, and it's effects heavy, and it's got a hip hop soundtrack, and I mean, I get what they were going for. It's just.
Well, Adam, before we go too deep into it, since this is a more recent movie, why don't you give people a brief plot synopsis of Project Power?
Okay, brief plot synopsis. So basically, there's this drug that hits the street that, you can take this pill and it activates these sort of like superpowers in everybody. And everybody gets a different power, and it only lasts for 5 minutes. and it can either be something really cool or you can literally explode from it. Everybody's different. So the cops are sort of like going against it with all these guys who can literally rob the banks with superpowers and shit. So there's this one cop who's taking it to try to level the playing field, and then all of a sudden this mystery man shows up trying to find the source, and it's Jamie Foxx. And you sort of go down his story and figure out why it's so important to him and how it ties directly into him. And then the cop becomes basically an afterthought. And then it's like this little girl who's the one dealing the drugs, and she gets wrapped up in it. And Machine Gun Kelly's there too.
Yeah,
that's about
pretty apt. This plot synopsis there, yeah, because I don't know, when you hear like that basic synopsis of like, hey, drug that can activate superpower in a person, it's like, oh, that sounds like a cool conceit. And it feels like one of those many Netflix movies where you hear the conceit, it's like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. What else? And they're like, did I mention the conceit?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, they're like, oh no, that's all we got for you. But to be fair though, it does look pretty legit, like when they take the pill and stuff. Like the effects of the powers and stuff is pretty fucking cool. Like it is a really cool sort of effect, and it's like you said, it's a really good sort of base idea and everything like that. Just the only problem is they took that base idea and made a 2-hour movie off of it. They didn't really even try to give you anything. It's just, maybe, oh look, this guy's gonna take a pill. Now this guy's gonna. Now this guy's gonna. And that's basically it.
Yeah, I don't really feel as invested in the characters as much as they kind of want us to be. I will say the biggest like highlight I can say for this movie is you mentioned the young lady, the Robin character played by Dominique Fishback. I think she is like the highlight of the movie. I think she's a really interesting discovery who I'd want to see more of. And in fact, she was just in Judas and the Black Messiah, playing Daniel Kaluuya's love interest. And she's very good in that as well. But I think here also she really stands out. Is like she's the one character I at least have some emotional investment in, and I think like her performance is like laid back enough to where she feels real, but at the same time has like a lot of like these fronts she's putting up in order just to survive in the middle of like her poorer area. Not so much with either Jamie Foxx, who I think is putting on the charm, but in a way that doesn't really make you feel as invested in this character. And then Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who this is the first movie I'd seen him in ages, because he hadn't really been in a movie since what was it, Snowden. That was the last like big movie he was in. And then randomly in last year in 2020, he had like 3 streaming movies come out, because there was like the one on Amazon where he was an airplane pilot and the plane was getting hijacked, and then there was also Trial of Chicago 7 he showed up in, along with this. Right. And it's just like, oh wow, it's been a while, dude, and you can tell it's been a while. He's rusty.
Yeah, well, not only is he maybe rusty, but this is just not a part for him.
He's very miscast as well, I agree. Very miscast.
He's incredibly miscast, because the thing is, he's a very capable actor. I think he's really, really good. I don't think he's good enough to carry a whole film, and I think we've seen that. Unless it's like a real indie darling or something weird like Brick or The Lookout or something like that.
But even like Brick has a lot of like supporting cast members around him who are able to carry.
Well, so does The Lookout. I mean, yeah, The Lookout as Jeff Daniels and Matthew Good are acting circles around Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Yeah, he's completely miscast. I never once believe him as this sort of against the rules, tiff cap. And then they really just drop his character and the whole motivation behind it to the point to where it's like, spoiler alert, but Jamie Foxx like, you're going to get a call from your captain telling him to bring you in. He's in on it, basically. And the very end of the movie is like, so what are you going to do? I don't know. I guess we'll see. And that's it.
And he's just like, I'm going to have a long, tough talk with Courtney B. Vance, my captain.
Yeah, and then that's it. That's it. There's no arc at all to his character. It's just,
Yeah. And it's the weird thing where Dominic Fishback has these kind of like weird friendships he has with like Joseph Gordon-Levitt for a while because he's apparently addicted to this drug. It has no side effects really. Whenever he takes like the most of these pills and has no side effects whatsoever. But they have like a chummy relationship, like, oh, you're doing the Clint Eastwood thing. What? Who do you know about Clint Eastwood? I've seen Bridges of Madison County. That's a good one. Right. Like that's.
I know. I know.
That's her back and forth. And then also the one that bothered me more though is her like growing friendship with Jamie Foxx, considering their sort of start is him horribly like kidnapping her and abusing her to get information.
Yeah, he's got a gun to her head and shit and says, I'm going to kill your fucking mom.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my God, good Lord.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, you're right about Joseph Gordon-Levitt. He takes a pill, the effects wear off. He takes another one, the effects wear off. He takes another. I mean, it's literally nonstop. This guy's popping these fucking things, and yeah, he's fine. You know, that's the one thing I liked about the Machine Gun Kelly character is you saw like literally after the first, you could tell he took the pill one time and he wore the effects on his body. Within the next time you see him, he's all fucking scarred up and shit. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. But they abandoned that with every other character.
Right, that sequence with Jamie Foxx where he's like chasing down Machine Gun Kelly, I think is the highlight of the movie, which unfortunately occurs in the first like 10 minutes of the movie.
I know. But yeah, I agree 100%. And then what's his fucking name? Xerxes in here.
Yes, Rodrigo Santoro, yes.
What was his whole fucking character? Like, he's basically comedic relief at one point.
Yeah, it's a weird inconsistency with his character because he initially introduces the drug to the streets, as we see earlier on. And then later on he has this whole speech that turns into like a weird ad almost for the drug, which is another problem I have with this, with the style. It's Henry Joost and Ariel Schulman are the directors who have directed a few movies that I've enjoyed, like The Third Paranormal Activity or Nerve, which was the one with Emma Roberts and Dave Franco. That was pretty fun. But like they definitely come from like commercials, and you can clearly tell with this movie because it feels like we're just going from one set piece to the next that's just like a different ad. Where it's like, oh, this looks kind of stylish, but also it feels really, like, lacking in any soul.
Yeah, I agree. Stylistically, it's there, man. It looks cool. There's a lot of cool filters, camera shots, a lot of good night filming. The action is filmed actually really well, too. The action photography is not bad at all. Mm-hmm. Within, like, 35 to 40 minutes, I literally stopped giving a shit. And it became a chore to finish this. Like, I literally found myself pausing it for every reason I could possibly think of. Oh, I gotta walk into the dining room, which is, I can see my television from my dining room. I still paused it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. Okay. Yeah. I just got bored.
Well, it feels like a movie very much designed to hook you in the way that, like, Netflix only really, like, they'll count you if you watch the first, like, minute or so of the movie. 1 to 2 minutes.
Yep. Like you said, the first 15, 20 minutes of this movie are really fucking cool. The kid rapping, the Joseph Gordon-Levitt thing with the kids who like attack her was still kind of cool because you have no idea who his character is yet. The stuff with Machine Gun Kelly and Jamie Foxx, really cool. And then it's like, literally, once she goes to like school the next day, it stopped pretty much dry for me. Not to say that she was bad, but that's kind of where the movie then turns into something else that different than the first maybe 15, 20 minutes sort of promised you.
Yeah, it feels definitely like it's a very traditional sort of like drug smuggling kind of movie that peppers in with like, oh, here are sequences of powers that happen. And it's this weird thing where like, aside from Joseph Gordon-Levitt with his power, like nobody has cool powers. Like that would be the interesting sort of dynamic, would be some people have really cool powers that they can utilize in interesting ways. Others, like, don't. You have, like, an even mix that makes it more interesting, as opposed to, aside from Joseph Gordon-Levitt's bulletproofness, like, everyone else has some kind of weird drawback to their powers. I guess there's also, like, another kind of cool sequence, I would say, is the bank robbery thing with the camouflage chameleon guy.
Yeah, that was cool.
That's kind of a cool power that, like, works for him. But, like, at the same time, most of them are just like, oh, hey, you turn into a giant, but, like, with Rodrigo Santoro, but it's only half of your body? Which is weird.
Right. Well, he was gonna he was blowing up anyways. Yeah. But the thing is, it's like, but then they define it that they're all traits from like animals and stuff. We're like, of course, right away. And this toad can, grow bones and use his weapon, so you're going to see that happen, which it does. And then Joseph Gordon-Levitt, you get the idea. Maybe it's like rhino skin or something where it's really tough. And then obviously the chameleon guy. But A, the dude, Machine Gun Kelly, what animal does that come from? Where he just engulfs himself in flames. And B, what is Jamie Foxx's discernible power? Where he can turn water into like a weapon? I think. I don't know.
He creates like some sort of weird hydrogen bomb thing. And I mean, I assume for the animal trait, I just assume a platypus. Like any weird trait, it's a platypus probably has that.
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, clearly.
Platypus or an anteater. Yeah, something weird like that.
some weird like creature at the bottom of the Mariana Trench.
Right. Yeah. Just some stupid ass thing. Like a glob. They're all blobfish.
Blobfish are secretly the most powerful creatures on Earth. We just don't know.
We had no idea. But but that's the thing too. They lose it there too because it's like you're setting up a base of where you guys get this sort of the chemistry foundation for this pill. You take DNA from different animals and stuff that awakens this sort of animal gene in each particular person. Yet half of them are undefined by anything that you would even find in the animal kingdom at all. It's kind of sloppy.
Yeah, it feels definitely like it's a spec script, which is what it was. It was just a script that was like going around Hollywood. It feels like one of those, like we've talked about, the Blacklist scripts, where if you don't know, it's like this list that comes out every year of like, oh, here are the scripts that everybody in Hollywood loves that hasn't been produced yet. And most of the time when those become movies, it ends up being like a really sloppy thing that just had a cool idea that's center. That's all what this feels like.
100%. But this would have been on the Blacklist.
Yeah.
I could see this being a Blacklist movie. Like, oh my god. But then, like you said, somebody gets the script and they don't fucking tweak it at all. Like, all right, that's what we're going with. And it gets, like I said, not necessarily lost in translation. It's all there. Just there's so much that is either A, unexplainable, or B, no follow through.
Yeah, and it's like I said, like when you have like these spotty rules, usually I can be distracted by like the character stuff. But as we mentioned about just Gordon-Levitt, that's pretty thin. And then like with the Jamie Foxx thing, his whole like thing, oh, I have a daughter I'm trying to find. Like, that's also so thin to the point where, like I said, that whole horrible introduction thing with him and Dominique Fishback. And then within about, like, 2 scenes after, he's like, oh, I shot down a bunch of people that were trying to kill you. Now all of a sudden we're friends, and you're, like, patching me up in the veterinarian offices and all that shit.
Let me hear you rap. Woo-wee! You're like, okay. All right. You know, it's just, yeah, it's dumb. Yeah, now we're all of a sudden, we're best friends. Within like 3 hours of him kidnapping her, she's protecting him and like lying to Joseph Gordon-Levitt about where he is and shit like that. It's dumb.
Yeah, and even Joseph Gordon-Levitt gets weird things. Like that whole sequence where he breaks into the house is like the 2 guys are seeking in and like trying to interrogate Dominic Fishback's mom, and he pops out of the shower and all that shit. Just weird comedy hijinks that are just like, oh, this is supposed to add character, but it's like, just makes him look like a fucking weirdo.
Yeah, it really does.
It doesn't make him seem clever, nor does it make me that invested in him, like, as a, oh my god, he's this cop who doesn't play by the rules. It's like, he just seems like a fucking weirdo who should not be around people.
The 2 cops that are there, who are supposedly, like, these government agents who are hunting down these people, gotta be the dumbest guys in the world. Because they're like, oh, yeah, you're right. My fault. Come on. Stop with this.
Yeah, also, I would say, even though I think Gordon-Levitt's miscast, my biggest miscasting thing, it's no offense to this actress who I like and other things, but Amy Landecker as, like, our surprise villain does not work at all. Like, I like that actress, but she does this weird, like, energy where she's supposed to be like, oh, I'm the person behind the person. But instead it's just like, you have the energy of, like, I want to speak to your manager when you're talking about, like, killing somebody. It just doesn't work.
Right, yes. No, I agree, and I agree with you, too. I really like that actress as well. She reminds me of, like, 7 different actresses, too. Mm-hmm. Like, she's definitely... But I really like her, too, but, yeah, don't, dumb. And there's fucking Pencil Mustache from fucking Equalizer. Again, did you see him?
Yes.
Yep, of course. There he is again. That fucking guy. I don't know why it's his mustache. It bothers me. But I think that was kind of a cool scene too, where he just becomes basically the Incredible Hulk. I'm like, all right, that's kind of cool. And I did like when he's beating on stuff, then it shows his hands and they're all fucked up from him punching the metal and they're bloody and stuff, but he can't feel it yet. So that was kind of cool. It's still, again, there's a lot of cool ideas that are just barely sort of capitalized on.
Yeah, it feels like it's one of these superhero satires where they're just like, oh yeah, what if superpowers? What if you had those? Guess what? Wouldn't be all sunshine and lollipops. You wouldn't be Superman. And it's like, okay. You got anything interesting to say about that, dude?
You're right. I've seen this 100 times. 100 times.
You're not Alan Moore, motherfucker. Come on, give me more.
At all. You're not even Robert Kirkman. Like, stop. Again, that's the problem with this movie, though. I'm glad, like you said, I'm glad I picked it because it is sort of the quintessential Netflix fail, to where it's like it's got a big budget and all these big actors and everything, and it's just not done very well. But unfortunately, that also means that I'm going to forget most of this movie if I haven't already.
Yep, I watched this when it came out around in August, and I had forgotten most of it before I booted it up earlier today. I made sure specifically to watch it as soon as possible to recording. so I could remember as much as possible.
That's smart. I watched it, I think, Wednesday night, and this is Saturday, and thank God you watched it today, because I wouldn't have remembered anything to talk about.
And to be fair, by the time I'm done editing this and putting this episode up, I will have completely forgotten about the movie again, which I never really plan on rewatching.
No, yeah, I'm good. I'm never going to rewatch this.
No, but yeah, it's like you said, though, it does feel like the quintessential sort of Netflix movie, especially where, like, this is ubiquitous with a lot of these movies, it feels like, where they just kind of put them out, and there's kind of an interesting flash with, like, who it is, and especially during quarantining, at the height of it, where it's just like, oh my god, we need something. People gravitate toward it. But ultimately, it just kind of, like, falls into the ether out of your head, goes through one ear out the other. As we're running on fumes here with Project Power, we'll go ahead and go into final thoughts. And so, Adam, your final thoughts on Project Power?
Ultimately forgettable. Some cool visuals in it. Some pretty neat camera tricks. First 10 minutes to 15 minutes are pretty exciting. But then it's just a slog to get through the rest. It's just ultimately forgettable in everywhere, from characters to plot to everything else. It exists. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen. It's not even the worst Netflix movie I've ever seen. But it's definitely, like, I would recommend this to somebody who is either really drunk or stoned and had nothing to watch and they couldn't find anything. I'd be like, well, maybe Project Power. That's if I could even remember the title by then.
Yeah, it's definitely, it feels like the exact kind of example you would put up for the forgettable Netflix movie, where it's got, like you mentioned, a pretty solid cast, though I think only Dominic Fishback really stands out, and cool premise it does very little with, aside from like a few fun action set pieces here and there. But yeah, ultimately it's very forgettable. And just kind of feels like it's wasting a lot there. Also, just another thing before we head off of this, Machine Gun Kelly you mentioned. Machine Gun Kelly is in, like, most of the movies from these directors. And I just want to know, like, does he have, like, blackmail on you guys? Because he's not very good. I don't get why he keeps being in your movies. Why do you keep casting him? Does he have something on you?
He's either got to be a buddy, or B, they're hoping name recognition, and he's willing to do it because he wants to be an actor.
Or C, what I think is more likely extortion.
Well, I mean, maybe. God only knows what it is.
Allegedly.
Maybe.
Allegedly. Satire, parody satire. But let's get into our next feature in just a moment after we hear this word from a great ESO you can queue up right after ours.
Look, we gotta talk.
Yeah, Thunder Talk.
We're going all kinds of sideways with that sweet nerd junk.
Woke nerd junk.
It's topical.
Political.
Dare I say radical.
We've got all your latest news and reviews.
Hot music.
And a whole lot of comedy.
But it ain't for kids.
Definitely mature content.
So let's talk.
Let's talk Thunder Talk.
Thunder Talk is a proud member of the ESO network.
All right, now we're getting into our good feature, The Night Comes For Us.
Bisa rencana hidup ini kan, tapi kita nggak pernah tahu di mana posisi kita akhirnya. Semua berakhir sekarang.
So, The Night Comes For Us is an Indonesian film that came out October 19th, 2018, over in the States here on Netflix. And before we get too much further, as is often the case when we talk about foreign films, we will preemptively apologize for mispronouncing several different names. Including the director, Timo Tjahjanto, I believe?
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, we'll go with that. Once again, apologies, dumb American. But he is a director who many people who would be fans of, like, Gareth Evans and the Raid movies, which there's some cast members that return from those movies in here. He is known for doing a lot of movies like that. Particularly, he collaborated with Gareth Evans. I almost said the Gareth Edwards thing, which he's not the guy who directed the Godzilla 2014 movie. He's the guy who directed the Raid movies. But he directed the segment of VHS 2 with Gareth Evans, the cult one. That's like one of the best segments in any horror anthology ever.
Well, easily out of those 3 movies too, for sure.
Right, yes. But it's if you have not seen those movies, I would definitely recommend watching VHS 2 mainly for that segment. It's really great. If you love sort of the intense, violent action of stuff like this for the Raid movies. And it's interesting also that we're covering a movie from him, by the way, given he was recently in the news. As of this recording, he is scheduled to make a remake of Train to Busan.
Why?
See, I would not be interested in a Train to Busan remake that much at all, if not for the fact that him doing it makes me at least excited for, like, okay, if he's doing it, it's going to be much more of, like, an over-the-top action movie, which makes it very different from the other movie. So, fine. That's, like, completely different.
It's going to be balls to the wall.
Yeah. Sure.
That's true.
Fine. That's, like, completely... Like, that movie has a lot of action beats that are, like, intense, but it doesn't have fucking... what happens in this movie? This movie is arguably way more of a horror movie than Train to Busan is, honestly. Because... Man. Like, our previous guest, Shaquille, warned me about this. Like, oh, man, you don't even know. This is a horror film. I'm like, I don't know, Shaquille. The Raid 2 was pretty bad. I don't know if it's going to be as bad. I'm like, oh, no, this is much worse. This is so much gorier. So much more intense.
It's so fucking gory and intense and crazy. I mean, yo, the pool ball.
Before we go too far into specifics, I guess briefly, because this is another one of those this is an example, I think, opposite of the Netflix sort of like forgettable movie, where this is a great one that kind of got lost in the shuffle, even for me. Like, I was curious to see this, and I just didn't back in 2018, because a bunch of other Netflix things came out amongst several other things in general, so I never got to it. So if you're not familiar, basically, this takes place in Indonesia, and is based around this drug smuggling ring known as the Six Seas, which basically means there are 6 individuals that are responsible for, like, drug trafficking in Indonesia.
For the Triad.
They're
sort of they're these outside forces that control sort of all the smuggling things on all the different coasts, and they have full sort of, they could do whatever they want sort of stuff. Like, there's no rules or limits to what they can do.
Right, and so at the start, one of those members, who is Ito, played by Joe Taslim, is going on this big raid to basically destroy the small village who had screwed over the Triad for some drug money. And they killed most of the village except for this one little girl that Ito decides to take mercy on and brings back to his apartment in Indonesia. When the Triad ends up finding out about this, that, like, oh my god, you killed, like, all of our enforcers that were doing this, and you took this little girl, we're gonna have to, like, kill you, you motherfucker. And so Ito, along with, like, his buddies, have to fight off against a lot of people that are sent by either the Triad or Aryan, who's another one of the Six Seas guys, played by Iko Uwais, who you would know from the Raid movies if you've seen those. Are basically out to take their vengeance upon him. And I like the fact that that is a pretty simple premise. So
yeah,
it's just like a very neat thing of, like, okay, yeah, so we have our stakes, we have, like, our basic story, our conflict, and all that pretty much established at the beginning. So then we have just a clothesline to hang all of our fights on. All of our various fights, horribly gory as they are, just like, oh, we know why this is happening. And that works perfectly.
Oh, good lord. Like, are they some of the goriest, craziest action fights you've ever seen or not? I mean, it is so fucking brutally violent. It's shocking at first, but then it almost becomes, like, numbing after a while, to where, like, oh, yeah, you almost expect it. It never lets up with the gore or the just pure severity of the violence. I mean, it's so intense.
Yeah.
And it's just so awesome. It's so awesome. Like, it is the Raid 1 and 2 combined on steroids.
Yeah, I would basically say that. I think I would say prefer either of the Raid movies necessarily, because I think just the choreography is a bit better in both of those. And I think also they're both kind of missing the one guy who, I apologize, forgot his name, but the dude who plays Mad Dog in those movies, who is my favorite, who I love seeing in anything. But at the same time, this one I think has the same principle that works, where it has brief respites from the violence just for, like, very minimal character stuff that's, like, it's not incredibly depthful or whatever, but it's just enough to kind of, like, continue the story going to some degree. But yeah, at the same time, it's still just, like, it doesn't give you a lot of, like, breathing time from, like, what's going on here
at all.
With and even then, like, I thought it would be numbing after a while with some of the violence, but then, as you mentioned, I think once we get to, like, the climax, they just, like, fully go even more forward with it in a way I'm just like, I'm a big horror guy and I love gore, but at the same time it was almost becoming like a clutching my pearls, like, someone think of the children, oh dear, it's so gory, my word.
Yeah, I get that. Well, see, this is my second time seeing it. I saw it when it first was released. A, because I'm a martial arts sucker. B, I love the Raid movies, and I was like totally stoked to check this out. And even then, knowing some of the beats that were coming, there's still a couple scenes to where I was literally like, oh god, like just disgusting and shocking. So many. I mean, most anything the blonde girl did was fucking like just like, I mean, when she would get the guy in the neck and then pull it out and you just see the flap of meat, I'm like, this is so fucking gross. And then her and her lover's whole fight with the girl with the motorcycle was so badass. Oh my god. I mean, that girl just rips her finger off like it's nothing. I mean, what is happening here?
Yeah, it's the combination of that and then also on the other side, the blonde lady's just like, I'm totally fine. Oh wait, I'm sorry, my intestines are in my hands.
Yeah, they're completely falling out. I am dead. I'm dying. But her lover's weapon was so brutal. Razor wire with a little weight on the end of it. Get the fuck out of here with this. And her ultimate comeuppance was just so fucked up. And I love the line, too. You're going to regret that. What, calling her a little bitch? No, wearing white. Like, oh.
And that pays off. It's just like, oh, you've become drenched in gore. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Horribly.
Before you go too far off of those three actresses, though, it's Hana Al-Rashid is Elena, the blonde one. Diana Satorwadoyo is Alma, who was the one with like the sort of Cupid cut. And then Julie Estelle is the operator, who was also Hammer Girl in the second Raid.
Yes.
Who's tremendous. She's such a fucking badass.
She's so bad. And she's such a badass in this movie, too.
Yeah.
Holy shit, what a badass. You know, to get on the other characters, I really loved Fatih and Bobby and all those guys. Like, they were super cool. What a cool sort of dynamic all of, like, Ito's old crew had. And way to go those guys, too, by the way, for killing hundreds of dudes.
Oh, good lord, yeah. That whole sequence where they're just, like, fucking people funneling into that apartment, it's just insane.
It's insane. And by the way, everybody takes about 40 more gunshots than they should be able to in this movie.
Oh, duh, 100%.
Like, nobody dies from barrages of bullets in this movie.
No, that's true. This movie has some of my favorite things I love in action movies, where either people being shot and they, like, fling themselves to side to side, like, oh, my arms, no. Yep. And then also the blood gurgling, which is like, a lot of that. That is 90% of the sound design is those blood gurgles.
You know, I knew I was going to fanboy out on this movie a little more than actually getting into plot, because like you said, the plot's very simple and it's all there.
Yeah.
The whole movie is the fight scenes and the gore and the unbelievability, like not the unbelievability of the violence, because I'm imagining a lot of these wounds are probably pretty realistic to what you would see. But the unbelievability that they are fully committed to going there and showing you that gore in the aftermath. I mean, it's fucking intense, dude, and it's crazy and wild. Joe Taslim, when he goes into that fucking butcher shop.
Yes.
Oh my god, dude.
That was the fight sequence that really hooked me into the movie, honestly. Because, like, there's one fight sequence before that with the Iko Uwes in the club, which I thought was, like, the weakest one, and then it's just, like, it feels like a very typical sort of raid sequence. But then the meat locker one is really where I got, like, hooked, like, oh, okay, we're going. This is where the movie's going. Keep going, please, more. Please on a plate, please.
And they do not skimp. They give you more and more and more and more and amp it up every time after that.
Especially, like, so many people on fucking meat hooks, which, like, I'm just imagining, like, Leatherface walking in just like, guys, stop. Too much.
I mean, he's clearly shoving them up their assholes and split their balls with them and everything. I'm like, this is fucking insane.
And the one dude whose, like, fucking mouth he slices open and he's got, like, the extra opened mouth.
I know.
And also, a shout out, I don't have this actor's name, but the dude who plays, like, the main meat locker guy with the glasses is so great. Just like, oh, this is chump change, what are you talking about?
He's such a weasel. Yeah. He's such a little weasel. Like, you know, Yeah, I agree. And you do see him for a second when they go back to the past and show like their crew together. He is standing there.
Right, I like the fact that this is what I really like about both the Raid movies. They always have distinctive characters like that make you invested, where like it has kind of like the structure of almost either like a video game or even weirdly like a musical sequence, where like we're gonna go right into a big choreographed thing that's like this intense, horrible, gory bloodbath instead of a musical number. But you have to have like these memorable antagonists to fight against. So it like really makes it like work so much more, because you get everything from like that meat locker guy right from the start, which is like, I have my glasses, I'm very serious about my business. Oh, you want to come to the back of the meat locker? Whatever, dude, we're gonna fuck you up. And then he gets fucked up royally.
Oh my god, does he ever? But that's the one thing I will say about this one, maybe in comparison to the Raid movies and even Headshot, is especially with the Joe Taslim character, when he's on the sort of the warpath in the meat locker or at the end in the clubhouse, or even when he fights the girl, he doesn't even feel like he's that choreographed. He feels like he's fighting purely on emotion the whole time.
Yeah, it feels almost more improvised.
Yeah, like he's just a fucking who could take hits. Whereas when you get Iko Uwais, like in the club scene or when he's fighting and stuff, it's very methodical and planned out. And the one thing I will say about that club scene, the broken bottle in the guy's mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And then he slams it on the table. Like, that's fucking crazy. Like, that's wild shit. Who thinks of that? But
no, I agree. I think that's what really works, is that you get a full sense of, like, whenever these individual antagonists, like Joe Taslim or any of our other guys have to fight against, like, they feel distinctive enough so you're like, oh, okay, they have a different fighting style from the other. Especially when you mention, like, when it's the big showdown between Iko Uwais and Joe Taslim, you feel a sense of, like, okay, this guy's far more put together like Iko Uwais, who also feels more like the traditional kind of movie star, whereas Joe Taslim feels much more like blue collar in a way when he was fighting up, and he's much more of like a bruiser, as you mentioned. So it makes their fight work so well, because it's two truly opposing forces fucking each other up in different ways.
Oh, in horrible ways, too.
Yeah.
That fucking little box cutter. Good God. But it makes me excited for, like, the future of these guys, because one thing I will say, especially about Joe Taslim, he's actually a pretty capable actor, too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's really good in this movie. Like, it's not, like, the best acting you've ever seen, but for, like, an action martial arts movie, he's really good. That's why I'm totally stoked. Actually, he's probably the only reason I'm stoked now at this point for the Mortal Kombat movie.
Yeah, after that trailer, he's the one thing that kind of sticks out as interesting.
Yeah. But, like, Iko Uwais, dude, he's really good, too. I mean, that final fight scene between the two of them, Jesus Christ. The most painful part of that final fight scene is when Joe Taslim's against the sort of steel beam, and Iko Uwais throws a hard-ass kick, and he moves. And he hits his leg. He's like, oh! I'm like, oh, no, you shattered his shin, dude. But then, of course, he does some fucking crazy-ass martial arts where he'll just, like, crack his leg in one place, and it's fine now. I love that shit so much in movies. In these movies, like, that's impossible. It's impossible. But whatever. I was hook, line, and sinker into this movie from basically the beginning. And like I said, I watched it today for the second time. And I mean, I sat and watched the whole thing. I didn't pause it. I didn't go to the bathroom. I didn't do anything. I absolutely, what a great action and a great sort of undiscovered Netflix original gem. This is not something that I would ever expect a Netflix original to be.
No, that's true, yeah, because it's their first Indonesian film that was produced, which is interesting given a lot of Indonesia actually has banned Netflix. Interesting kind of tidbit.
Like 47% of the country or something can't watch this fucking movie.
Right, which is interesting. But so, yeah, it shows that they're able to branch out. This is what I like about sort of Netflix in terms of, like, they have so much money and they're the biggest game, because Netflix has almost become kind of like a necessity for streaming. Like, if you want streaming content, it's like everyone at least has Netflix to, like, watch whatever, because they're like, well, they have everything. And Netflix has really weighed into that with that strategy we're talking about. We're just like, are you a martial arts enthusiast? Well, here's The Night Comes For Us. Oh, do you like great cinema directors? Here's The Irishman, sir. Like, they have all these different dishes for everybody. They just have them there. And I think that this one, it really works, because it's like we mentioned, like, the fight scenes, like, it doesn't really relent that much, but it also really knows how to escalate the fights. I think that's my problem with, like, I also watched watched Headshot, which is from the same director, and I think that one has much more of a problem of, like, it has spurts and starts for the action beats. They're fun, but, like, there's a lot more heavy, like, dialogue sequences and stuff that just doesn't feel nearly as interesting as it thinks it is, as opposed to this just knows, like, yeah, we got a basic plot here, but let's keep moving with these fight sequences.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Man, just how smart some of these action scenes are in this movie too. Like I love the scene when they go to get the girl and it Hammer girl from Raid 2 protecting her, and that sort of grease ball and his couple guys get in the elevator and go up. As soon as the elevator opens, she just plugs all of them. Just horribly just shoots them all to death. But then she gets sort of cornered, and she hides behind that little pillar, and then they go and sort of show, and she's got a bunch of C4.
Yeah, the C4, yes.
Dude, and she blows up, and it's just a horrible mist of red and gore.
And, like, somehow 2 guys are still alive that she just shoots immediately.
Right, and then she fights the blonde girl with the kukri knife through the hallway, and they're using the body parts to block each other's knives and stuff.
Yes, which, by the way, this has all been preceded by the whole sequence where she ends up destroying, like, the blonde woman's partner.
Air conditioner!
The air conditioner and the, like, wire thing. It's, like, so... Like, all of this is within, like, a fucking 5-minute 10-minute span, or whatever. It's insane.
Yeah, and it's so dope. It's so dope.
By the way, also, Reina, the little girl, she's just mentally fucked, right? Like, there's no coming back from this emotionally on any psychological level.
Yeah, no, she's fucked. To the point to where the last guy who she thought was in charge, taking care of her, it comes to her and he's bloody and can barely speak, and he's yelling at her to get on the boat to leave.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's mentally she's gone.
Even though she's a trooper, God bless her, she is she is very, like, she even gets to stab a guy in the neck. She's like, oh, how adorable. You murdered that man horribly. And, like, I don't know, like, that person on the boat needs to give her some fucking ice cream, I swear. That fucking kid deserves it after all that.
Dude, give her $1 million. Good lord.
I meant at least some ice cream to start. Have you said your favorite sort of action set piece yet? Or is there one you really want to spot that you maybe haven't?
Well, I sort of said it in the beginning, but the whole bit in the clubhouse where he bends the one guy backwards over the pool table and uses the 8-ball to smash his face in.
Yes.
That's pretty hardcore. But then he cuts off the sort of bag that's in the pocket that holds the pool balls and beats a dude's head in with it so bad and so graphically where you literally see his brains leaking out.
And blood spurting out like a fountain.
Like a fountain. And then it shows the bag, and there's just bits of hair and gore sticking out of it. And then it cuts to the other action beat that's going on. I mean, it's so fucking graphic and violent. It's so cool. It's so fucking badass. I absolutely, that's the one thing I remembered from this movie, was just that scene, because I'm like, that's so fucked up to me. Like, it's just so gory and violent. That's the one thing I like about these movies, is that they use any object they can possibly find to inflict damage. And it's all believable. Like, you could believe that someone could take a pool ball and crush someone's face with it. I don't want to see that, but it's believable that it could happen.
Yeah, I mean, I would say my favorite is definitely, it's the one with the 3 ladies fighting each other in the apartment that we mentioned previously. I think that's just the most consistently great action sequence. But I just want to highlight a moment. It's not really even technically an action beat, but it's just sort of like a weird kind of dark comedic point where there's a whole sequence we haven't really talked about that much involving like a shootout in a parking garage that just super destroys the car that Reina and which character was it who was driving the car? Fati, right. Where they're both in the car, and he's just like, well, let's keep going. And then he starts driving the car while like the door's barely hanging on. It's just a shot of the car turning in the parking garage, and the door falls.
But then, dude, that motherfucker, what a badass he is. He still kills 2 guys.
Yes.
Like, after that, he still uses that little 6-shooter and gets 2 more guys down before they just fucking light him apart. But still, yeah, that's a great scene, too. Oh, what about the fucking back of the police van?
Yes, we haven't even talked about that. That's so awesome.
Oh my God, with the grenade. Oh, or when he's got the one guy, he's got two guys pinned, and one's got his assault rifle pointed at the other one's face, and he tasers that guy, and he unloads the clip into the other guy's face.
By the end of that sequence, it literally is covered in like hamburger meat. It's not even human meat anymore. It's become hamburger like diced up meat.
No, it's just There's no human left. It's just viscera and gore. I mean, that is so fucking crazy. And then the grenade. Oh my God.
And also shout out to Joe Tesla managing to like survive that, and then people are like, "Oh my God, what's happened over there?" And he steals that one dude's car. Just GTA's that dude's car.
Yep. Dude, Joe Taslim's a fucking bad dude. Man.
No, he is.
Ito's a bad motherfucker, man.
Yeah, and Joe Taslim, you might recognize also in terms of American stuff. He was in Fast and Furious 6.
Yes.
And Star Trek Beyond as well.
Oh, he was. That's right. Yeah,
Yes.
he was. You know, the one thing I will say about this movie is the sort of surprise that Ito is revealed as one of the 6 C's to Adrian or whatever his name is, Iko Iwas. Like, yeah, we know already.
Yeah, we figured as much given he was like the main person who hasn't become hamburger meat after the first half.
In the beginning, after the opening text scroll, I got it.
Yeah.
But other than that, I love this movie. This movie's damn near a perfect 5 for me, especially as far as just brutal, violent movies.
Would you say you prefer it to the Raid movies, or?
No, I honestly, the first Raid is still my favorite one. If anything, because of the hallway sequence and then the fight between Mad Dog and Iko Iwas and his brother in that little ass room is so just visceral and crazy. And then I think I'd go this one, and then, I mean, honestly, it could change between this one and the Raid 2 constantly.
Yeah, the Raid 2 I think has a bit more pacing problems that might convince me it's maybe slightly preferable. But at the same time, I think just some of the action sequences in the Raid 2, like Hamburger alone, I think make it slightly above that for me. But this is definitely, I think, I would say a close third with those Raid movies. In terms of like the modern sort of Indonesian martial arts movies, for sure. And yeah, even as someone, like we've mentioned this before, I'm not as big of a martial arts person. I've really grown to especially like these movies because it's like you mentioned, there's just sort of like it has a horror movie aesthetic to it that I can latch onto, where it just becomes like, no, this is just like a slasher movie basically, but with like martial arts kicking and shit. And it's a sight to behold. In the same way that, like I mentioned, the musical comparison, it feels like when you watched Gene Kelly dance back in the day, we're just like, wow, these physical feats I could never do, all on the screen. Only there's a lot more blood and gore in this.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Like Singing in the Rain and The Night Comes for Us, I don't think you can combine them. You can compare them.
I know Singing in the Gore would work.
That would be something.
That would be something.
The combination of those two would be something.
Make them die, make them die. Make their heads split open and die.
But, I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and get into my final thoughts here on this one.
Yes.
For anybody who's sort of martial arts movie, action movie fan, or if you're a fan of like Yakuza or Triad movies or any like Siege movies or any of that type of stuff, if you like Dread, if you like the Raid movies, you owe it to yourself to watch this. It's fucking awesome. It is so well done, so well acted. The practical effects are incredible. I mean, it's a action film fans like wet dream, this movie. This is every movie that I wanted to see when I was a kid, because I thought, oh yeah, oh god, and you create like, or think in your head like, oh man, how bad was he messed up after this? This one shows you how bad the violence is, but it's done in such a beautifully choreographed way to where it's so exciting to watch. I just can't believe about this movie enough. I think it's a perfect modern martial arts masterpiece.
Yeah, and plus it seems we're going to be getting a lot more of that, since also recently in the news that Gareth Evans of the Raid movies is going to have an exclusive deal with Netflix now, and he just, they announced that action thriller Havoc, starring Tom Hardy, is going to be his first project with them, which I'm extremely excited to see Tom Hardy do some of that action choreography, if that's possible.
Yes, fuck yes. Well, I know this was originally going to be a trilogy too, so I'm very if they'll do more, because the second one was supposed to follow I forget what her character name is in this. It's like the Protector.
If you're referring to Julie Estelle, I believe you're referring to the Operator.
The operator, yes. It was originally going to follow her and then another one of the 6 C's.
Because we only see about, like, what, how many of the 6? 2? Yeah.
2 of them.
So in theory, you could just have 2 more in the next one and then 2 more in the third one if you did a trilogy.
Yeah. Because the two female are part of another group. I forget. She says what they are, and she says their numbers. And the blonde is like, I always hated those fucking rankings.
Oh god! Also, like, even though it's like once it's subtitled, and you like sometimes that the language might like not quite translate as well. None of those sequences lose any of their bite when they're like doing the trash talking to each other. It's so good.
It's so good.
So fucking good. I mean, because for my final thoughts, I don't have a lot to add with what you said. I would say I definitely did really enjoy it. I can definitely say that even as like a gore horror fan, there was a certain point where, like I said, I was clutching my pearls, like, guys, this is a bit much, you know, like I gotta like sit down and breathe for a second. But at the same time, that still really works for this movie. You're still just like really entranced with like all the horrible gore that's going on, but also just the choreography on display. It's just so phenomenal seeing all these people just really be able to do these amazing stunts that make you awe at the same time you want to vomit out of terror. It just it works perfectly. So yeah, definitely. If this is
dude, like I said, that meat flap on Homeboy's neck is one of the grossest things I've ever seen in my life.
Or even the pinky thing, like you mentioned with Julia Still, where she, not even thinking about it, just rips off her pinky just because it's a loose appendage I don't need anymore.
Yep, it's an inconvenience at this point.
No, it's true. So definitely, if this was one you missed amongst the Netflix stockpile, we would definitely recommend digging it up, finding it. If you can handle, like we said, the horrific, ungodly amounts of gore. So, that's the end of our 2 films that we're discussing for the night. But we got some more things to do, including doing our picking for next week's episode, so stay tuned for that. But first, we want to read some feedback, because every Monday over at DEDBpod, that's on Facebook and Twitter, we ask you all about, like, hey, what are your favorite, least favorite movies related to whatever topic that we're covering? So we asked you all naturally about Netflix originals. So we got a bunch of friends of the show contributing to the feedback. Like last week's guest, Shaquille Lambert says, good, El Camino, Da Five Bloods, The Babysitter, 6 Underground, Dolomite Is My Name, Roma, The Irishman, bad, Bright, The Cloverfield Paradox, Polar, Point Blank, The Babysitter, Killer Queen, and Death Note. Then James Rodriguez says best 13th, His House, 6 Balloons, The Night Comes For Us, Roma, Marriage Story, The Irishman, Da Five Bloods, worst Death Note, The Do-Over, El Camino Christmas, The Open House, 6 Underground, and Mute. Scott Johnson says best Netflix, Cam, Shirkers, The Irishman, Klaus, Dolomite Is My Name. Worst Netflix, Bright, The Ridiculous Six, Wine Country, Operation Christmas Drop, and Mascots. And then Christian Alvarez says, without mentioning Netflix's wonderful documentaries, the streaming service has a surprising library of hits and misses. Favorites, El Camino, the Breaking Bad movie, Gerald's Game, Enola Holmes, and The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. Worst, Death Note, Bright, The Cloverfield Paradox, Hillbilly Elegy, and The Ridiculous Six. So yeah, I mean, there were some definite crossover ones, like El Camino in particular was one that, like, that's a great example of one where Netflix has had a history of, like, kind of dropping movies that sort of have some kind of, like, either a sequel or a continuation to something, and usually they're disappointing. I would say El Camino is one of the rare ones that actually does work, especially because, like, it follows, if you don't know, it's after the end of Breaking Bad, and it follows Jesse Pinkman. And they released that in October of 2019, and we didn't hear about it until August. It was just like suddenly like, oh, there's a Breaking Bad like continuation movie happening. That's insane, but it really worked. And I also had a weird experience with that movie where I watched on a plane. And near the end, there's a supporting turn from Robert Forster, who was on Breaking Bad previously, reprising a role here. And I was like, oh, it's so great to see Robert Forster. I rarely see him so much. And then I got off the plane, and I looked on the internet, and he had died. That was really weird that happened. Like, what?
See, I've never seen that one, because I didn't watch Breaking Bad. Only because the hype was so big for it, to where it became daunting. To where I'm like, well, do I want to jump in from the beginning? We're already in like season 5. Like, just it's nothing that I never really got into. So I skipped that one. I will agree with the Cloverfield Paradox being a huge letdown, which was my alternate choice for this. Clearly a script that was sort of retooled to fit the Cloverfield. I mean, without a doubt, I think.
Yeah, and it was the whole hype around it being announced at the Super Bowl, like right after the game. It's on. And I watched it right after the game, and I remember kind of liking it fine when I saw it at that point. But then the huge backlash against it, I think just that strategy really ended up screwing them over in terms of like the perception. Like I'm sure they got like a huge amount of fucking people watching, but at the same time, it's just like, oh, what the fuck, Netflix? Like that kind of thing. People remember shit like that.
Yes, absolutely. Mascots was a huge letdown for me too.
I still haven't seen it just because I like Christopher Guest so much. But I'm like, I don't. I don't.
I love Christopher Guest movies. I absolutely think they're some of the funniest movies that exist in modern time. So I was super pumped to watch that one, and it was a big letdown. Cast was fine in it. It's just it was I don't know. It felt like there was no heart to it, like there is all the other ones. The other ones, his other movies feel like there's a genuine sense of heart and love behind them. The mascots just felt kind of cold, so it just didn't work for me.
Yeah. Also, shout out, Scott mentioned Cam, which Netflix horror selection is kind of wonky, but I would say Cam is one of the better ones. If you don't know, it's basically about this woman who works as a cam girl. She'll go online and she'll like get money basically so she can do like various different like fetish things in a way that's like super sex positive. Like the star is also the writer, and she actually worked as a cam girl for a while, and then she starts to notice that her account is still on and she's on there doing new things. It's not like a repeat or anything. And she's like, I'm not online. What the fuck's happening? It's a really interesting horror movie. I would recommend to anybody out there.
Oh, that sounds actually pretty interesting. I had no idea what it was about. And then, of course, the Stephen King ones we've gotten have been pretty good. Like Gerald's Game was good.
Yes.
1922 was good.
Once again, another one that got lost in the shuffle really badly.
Very good. Really good Tom Jane performance, by the way.
And even Mike Flanagan, not Stephen King related, but also he did Hush, which was on there, which is tremendous.
Oh, yeah. Hush is fucking awesome. But, yeah, the thing is, I would say there's more miss than there are hits for Netflix, but the hits are really good.
At least we said, like, there's a lot of variety to the misses. Like, I'll say just two complete weird opposite examples. Like, I think my least favorite Netflix one is Little Evil, which was the follow-up from the guy who made Tucker and Dale versus Evil. And is, so like, bad. The polar opposite of that movie in terms of, like, oh, you like a funny horror comedy? How about not? How about a date movie level parody of The Omen? Like, just a piss poor parody. But at the same flip coin, recently, they put out Malcolm and Mary.
With Zendaya?
Right, Zendaya and John David Washington. And it was a movie made in lockdown, and it's basically just about John David Washington plays a filmmaker who just came back from a premiere of one of his movies, and Zendaya is like a model that he's dating. And the whole movie it's shot in black and white, and it's all looks so classy, and it's John David Washington having these huge monologues about how much he hates, like, film critics, and how much, like, he hates the industry, and it's the most self-indulgent horseshit I've ever fucking seen. But Netflix put their money behind it and put it out there, so just once again, two very different movies that they put out that are just like, well, they're both awful, but very different in their awfulness.
Yeah, see, I haven't. Little Evil I've seen. I got the impression from the previews of the other one that it was sort of pretentious.
Oh yeah, I don't like using that word that often, but that is 100% a pretentious movie. 100%. But what about you? What are some misses then for you, Adam?
Like I said, I'm not really that well versed in watching most of them, but I will say, offensively, Ridiculous Six is definitely up there. It's so bad to where I just what you know what I mean? Have you ever seen it?
No.
Yeah, you really don't need to.
Yeah, I've avoided most of the Sandler ones, though. Like we mentioned this on our Sandler episode, even. Like at the same time, he'll also have Netflix bankroll stuff like the Meyerowitz Stories, the Noah Baumbach movie. Or even, like, Uncut Gems is one of those weird examples where it was released mainly to theaters in the States. Everywhere else, it was straight to Netflix.
Oh, okay. You know, another one, I started it and I stopped it, is Coffee and Kareem.
Yeah, I heard about that one. That's the one with, who's in that?
Ed Helms and Taraji Henson.
Yes.
It's really bad. And then, I mean, it's really, really bad. And another one that I was totally stoked on watching, but it's just so jumbled and kind of all over the place, is The Last Days of American Crime.
Oh, okay.
Really good cast, really sort of very Oliver Stone-ish, like the way it sort of reminds me of like Natural Born Killers, or even the way Savages was shot, which wasn't a good movie. But Savages, it's really bad. It's a real big disappointment. So, I mean, like I said, I don't really get into a lot of them because it is such a minefield. But those are the ones I've seen that I can remember are just dog shit.
I mean, even there are ones also that aren't necessarily ones I love, but ones that were like, I like what they're doing with it, like something like Set It Up, which I hadn't actually seen until Valentine's Day. It's a romantic comedy that was really big when it came out, but once again kind of got lost after like the week everyone was talking about it, where it's basically about two personal assistants for two like big corporate types who work in the same building, like hate their bosses. And it's Glenn Powell's one of them, and Zoe Deutsch, who is Leah Thompson's daughter, is the other one. And they're like, oh, we hate our bosses, and they're so angry with each other. It's probably because they aren't with anybody. How about we set them up together? And the bosses are, his is Taye Diggs and hers is Lucy Liu.
Oh, yes.
It's a very cute romantic comedy that like just really works. That's like, it's not my favorite of the Netflix movies, but I'm like, oh my god, that works really well. It's very cute. And then once again, another flip side, His House, which was recommended by a few people, which is the one about the immigrants that come over from Sudan, southern Sudan, and their house is haunted. It's not a movie I loved, but it's a movie that shows a lot of great promise for the director and the like actors and everything. It's a very different movie than like all the other ones we mentioned, but it works really well. It's like we said, variety is the spice of life with Netflix.
Oh yeah, dude, and one we both forgot to mention, and nobody else mentioned it. Fucking Klaus.
Well, Klaus was mentioned by, I believe, Scott mentioned that.
Well, I don't count him.
But I mean, no, I agree with Klaus. Yeah, we talked about it a bit. If you listen on the Patreon to our top 10 holiday movies bonus podcast we talk about that one a lot. That's very underrated, especially if you like traditional animation alone. It's one of the few to come out recently in that style, and it's gorgeous.
Oh, it's beautiful. What a great movie.
But thank you for all that great feedback, everybody. We also want to thank some other people, like Chris Oliver for the intro and outro music used in our show. Listen to more of his music at chrisoliver.bandcamp.com. Thanks to Emily Scarda for the art for our show. And thanks, of course, as we mentioned a couple of times here, our patrons, edgelord patrons, over at patreon.com/DEDBpod, where for just $1 a month, you all get to vote in polls where you pick topics we do and movies we cover, like The Night Comes For Us. And also you get to listen to bonus podcasts like will be coming out in the same week this episode's coming out. There will be a bonus podcast where we talk about our top 10 favorite robots in TV and film.
Yeah. It's nerdy as shit.
It's very dorky.
I can't wait to record it.
We're literally going to record it right after this episode, so we'll be having a lot of fun with that.
Yes, we are.
Yes, and you can also follow us for all our antics at DEDBpod for Facebook and Twitter. And also you can submit feedback to us, doubleedgedoublebill@gmail.com, all spelled out. And if you want to help out and maybe can't become a patron on a regular basis, why not just buy some Double Edge Double Bill branded merchandise on the TeePublic store for the ESO network, where you can buy a mug or a mask or a t-shirt with our logo on it. It looks pretty great, and we get a kickback for everyone that buys something, so it helps us out.
Yeah, buy some stuff. I know I've done it before, but I'm going to do it again because it never gets old. Buy my stuff. Buy my stuff.
No cease and desist from the critic, please. But for more of our individual antics, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd as @NotTheWho'sTommy, and also I do some writing at marianithomas.wordpress.com.
And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Atom or Adam. That's ATOM_OR_ADAM. I mostly share pictures of a mural I've been working on. It took me only less than 2 weeks, and I finally finished it today. And I just got 2 new little dogs, so you're going to see a lot of pictures of them too.
Yep, that mural looks pretty damn good. It's a lot of great hip-hop artists on your wall.
Thanks, man. Thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get my security deposit back if I ever move out, but fuck it.
I love it when you call me Big Pop. That means I get your money.
Yup.
And for more of our antics, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and other podcasting platforms. If you're listening on ESO, why not dig into the other great shows on the network, of course. And you can even find the archives of several episodes we did before we joined ESO over on our Podbean main feed. And if you can't, buy some merch or can't support us on Patreon, the most cost-effective way to help us out is just to rate, review, or share the show around, because that gives us more visibility. And let me check my price tags. Oh yeah, that is free to do any of those things.
100%. If you do that for us, we will be eternally, eternally grateful.
Yes. And now, Adam, it's time to see how grateful you're going to be about the picks that we're doing for next week, because next week we're going back to doing another actor, but this is one we had definitely had in the cards for a very long time, because we love this man in his best times. In his worst times, he's not the best, but it is Mr. Eddie Murphy. We're finally doing an episode all about Eddie Murphy, because the week that we're putting that episode out, it'll be the streaming debut of Coming to America,
which is fucking PG-13.
Yeah, that was a bummer to hear about, for a lot of reasons. I'm not excited about that necessarily, especially also that it just feels like we're doing really big comedy sequel territory of like, everyone's back. Yes. Everyone. Yeah. We got everyone back. But, we can at least...
have a child. Oh, God.
Yes, but... we can at least look back on Eddie Murphy's career. It's a good excuse as any. And you have the two good picks, Adam. I have the two bad.
Yes.
Yes, so it'll be very interesting because you've assigned them between 1 and 10 for yours. I've done the same for my bad picks. So we'll pick a number between 1 and 10 for each other's choices, and that gets us our good and bad features. So for your two good ones, Adam, I'm going to pick, in honor of the sequel, 2.
Well, at number 2, with a bullet, I have something that's actually would have worked for our show we did tonight. It's a movie that came out that I've been wanting to see, and I haven't watched it because I knew this episode was coming. It is the Netflix Dolomite Is My Name.
Yay! I'm so happy. I love it so much. I haven't
watched it yet. I can't wait to watch it. I'm super stoked on it. And, I mean, this is kind of the movie that brought him back again.
Yes, he's gotten a lot of praise for that, and I'm one of those people praising him, so I can't wait to talk about that next week. Well, what was your other choice?
48 Hours, the original.
Yeah.
Which I still think is a great, great movie.
It was his big cinematic debut after he went on SNL for like a couple of years and blowing it up.
Yep.
It's a real big star-making turn. But now, for my two bad choices, Adam.
Oh, no. Because the bad are so bad
for
Eddie Murphy. Ah, fucking shit. All right. Suck my butt. I'll go number 8.
Well, at number 7, I have a movie that was done at the peak of his family film days, and is a massive disappointment for me as a fan of a certain amusement establishment you can go to. It is Disney's The Haunted Mansion.
Oh, God. Oh, no. See, I didn't even think you were going to... Oh, that one didn't even enter my radar of what you might pick, and that is so bad. I only saw it the one time, and I remember hating it so vehemently. Oh, fuck. I think I just popped a blood vessel in my eye. Oh, no. Okay. Oh, God. All right. And your other?
On the opposite end, I had, at number 3, The Golden Child.
Oh.
Which was sort of like, even in the middle of his heyday, that was sort of like the big bad one people point to. Well, it was like that and what was it? It was Best Defense as well, which was infamous because they added him in later.
And like Harlem Nights gets a lot of shit on it too, which I disagree with, but still that was one that didn't perform that well.
Dolomite Is My Name and The Haunted Mansion. That'll be a very interesting double feature next week for everybody. But until then, guys, we gotta say goodbye because there's a giant stampede of people about to enter this apartment and just murder us with machetes. We gotta defend ourselves, Adam. Let's do it.
Yeah, thank God we have weird animal bones and pieces of wood with nails sticking out of them.
A board with a nail, and it always saves the day.
Always saves the day.
Good night, everybody.
Bye!
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping at the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.